Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you guys yet again for tuning in. We should have another fantastic show. As always, as we are entering the kind of final games of these playoffs, we are going to be looking at the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals, although since this is kind of a weird day in terms of Stanley Cup Finals, I'll be looking at the Conn Smythe betting odds for today's first segment of the show. Then we'll be going and recapping a very interesting Game 3, to say the least, between the Boston Celtics and Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals. At the midpoint of our show, we have a very intriguing segment after Darren Waller's retirement, how it changes the tight end fantasy landscape and who to kind of lean into for the upcoming season in terms of fantasy football, so it should be very intriguing. But then stick around to the end of the show where more Euros action takes place. I will be previewing not just one but two teams and two heavy favorites in this tournament, so you want to stick around for that. But before we get into all the fun stuff, I just want to remind you to please like, follow, and subscribe to the show. It is a huge support. We also get a lot of tips and donations, so if you do feel so inclined, leave them at the link GSMC.cloud. Sorry about the little preview for our last segment there. Leave a little link at GSMC.cloud. It is greatly appreciated. Huge support to both me, my fellow podcasters, and most importantly, the network as a whole. So do consider that. But without further ado, let's get into the show. Let's start off with hockey. Specifically, the Conn Smythe betting odds, as the series has kind of shifted in Florida's favor. We kind of see this volatility in the Conn Smythe betting odds, and it has been that way for kind of both finals, really, as certain teams have taken charge of the finals. We could be heading for sweeps in both, but right now, as Florida sits at a 2-0 lead, this Conn Smythe betting odds highly reflects that kind of factor. Let's start off with the number one player, and who else can it be except for the brick wall? I keep on saying he's a brick wall because he is, in my mind, Sergei Bobrovsky at minus 1,600. Then we go to Alexander Barkov. Don't think he's going to be staying in the second position for long due to his injury. We'll have to see how he plays through that at plus 500. Then McDavid drops from first to third at plus 500, and in fact is the only Edmonton Oiler still in the top 5 of the betting odds. Make of that what you will. Then we round out the top 5 with Matthew Tkachuk at plus 1,200 and Carter Verhaeghe at plus 2,200 to round out our top 5. So as you can see, like before, kind of a very Florida-centric top 5, but McDavid was at the top of the list, mainly due to the fact that he was the best player in this final. But still, you can see guys like Leon Draisaitl and Evan Bouchard slowly dropping down. I still think McDavid being in the top 3 is a little ambitious and puts a lot of pressure on McDavid to deliver as the series shifts back to home in Edmonton. But I do think that the top 2, we can get rid of Barkov, so the top 1 really is well-deserved for Sergei Bobrovsky. Think about this. We have seen so many good goaltending runs in these past couple of playoffs. We've seen guys like Jordan Binnington in his rookie season when the Blues won. We've seen guys like Jake Ottinger also in his rookie season have a huge breakout. These different runs, Carey Price when he was a little bit older, Braden Holtby as well. So we've seen so many good goaltending runs to get to the point in the playoffs. But this one just feels a bit different, mainly due to the fact that the Florida Panthers don't necessarily feel like they have to rely on Sergei Bobrovsky. He is just elevating his game above and beyond what people expect of a high-end goaltender. Whereas guys like Binnington and Jake Ottinger kind of stepped into these teams that weren't necessarily as well-rounded as this Florida Panthers team is right now at the current moment, and elevated their game to kind of really help this team. Without them, maybe their respective teams would not have made it to this point. But it's different with Sergei Bobrovsky. 14-5 record, over 910 save percentage, under 180 goals against average in this playoffs. So you can see the fact that Sergei Bobrovsky feels like it's well deserved. We don't necessarily say that about so many goalies in this era of the NHL, where so many defensemen and centers kind of step up in the playoffs. The past couple of Conn Smythe trophies have gone to high-level defensemen. That's as far as they will go to giving more defensive-minded players a trophy in the playoffs. But right now, it just feels right to see Sergei Bobrovsky sitting at the top of the rankings. 2 fantastic games to start off the finals. I think that he will need to continue that because more pressure will be on him as the series shifts to Edmonton. It is one of the best atmospheres in all of hockey. The place will be rocking for their Oilers to come back. And a lot of pressure will be on this Florida Panthers team, especially now that Barkov, his status is up in the air. Obviously, I don't necessarily think the Florida Panthers are just around Barkov, but he is a huge part of that team. I still think Florida needs to keep their mindset in the right place. I think that in this series, obviously one of the furthest distances between Stanley Cup finals, so maybe that kind of mindset sets in as Florida makes the long journey to Edmonton of cockiness settling in. So I do kind of expect maybe in the next couple of days for these Conn Smythe rankings to change again. But as it stands right now, Sergei Bobrovsky definitely looks like the most well-deserving player in that position. Now, as for the Edmonton Oilers side of things, Connor McDavid being third is kind of the right place for him in my mind. Because he's kind of always going to be lurking there, especially as the series shifts back to Edmonton. I don't think Connor McDavid has any pressure on him at the moment. I know it's kind of weird to say, but I think he can rely on this Edmonton team to kind of bolster themselves around him. And so I really, truly believe that Connor McDavid is one of those guys who, when all is said and done, can even this series and really regain status in this Conn Smythe Trophy betting odds, especially when the Panthers' best offensive-minded player is injured as well, and his status is up in the air. So, do I expect other Edmonton players to rise? Should they steal 1 or 2 games at home? Not necessarily. I think that Connor McDavid has to be the catalyst of that. Obviously, I think Leon Draisaitl and Evan Bouchard can elevate their games because they've been doing it for the entirety of the postseason. But when all is said and done, Connor McDavid is the face of the team. He is the brand of this team. And coming back home to Edmonton, I really think that Edmonton will be the more focused of the two. Their focal points will be focused on a lot more. They're a little bit more upbeat. I think at even strength, they know they need to improve, and so they'll focus on that. And I wouldn't be surprised if Connor McDavid ascends to at least the number 2 spot. Now, looking at the other guys in the top 5, in Matthew Tkachuk and Carter Verhaeghe, they have been really kind of quiet, in my opinion, in this Stanley Cup Finals. They have had decent postseasons, both of them. So, Matthew Tkachuk and Carter Verhaeghe, I'm not necessarily mad to see them in this top 5, but they definitely need to keep performing in this Stanley Cup Finals because right now their goaltender is just sitting pretty up there. And it just feels like, in terms of the series as a whole, Florida just has a lot of house money in every area of this series. They own the 2-0 lead. They own the better goaltender. They own all the problems that Edmonton is trying to solve right now. Their penalty kill has been fantastic. Their power play, while they haven't had many, has been stellar. It just goes to show that maybe that mindset might be what comes back to bite them. Is the only hope that Edmonton may have in this series, in this Conn Smythe betting odds. Because Connor McDavid, he's lucky to be sitting third. I think guys like Evan Rodriguez have especially stepped up. I think he's a dark horse in terms of betting odds. Should he continue his fine form in the Stanley Cup Finals, he needs to make up a lot of ground because there have been a lot of good Florida Panthers performances by other players in previous postseason rounds. But Connor McDavid just feels like he's lurking in the background. He is the kind of monster waiting to come out of the ashes and rise again like the phoenix. And so I feel like these Conn Smythe betting odds, you really are hard pressed to find a terrible option. but you also are very hard-pressed to find a safe option. I do think Sergei Bobrovsky well deserves to be in this list. He has had a stellar postseason, nothing short of fantastic in between the creases for Florida, but it just feels like there is that opportunity, that sense of mystery, that sense of aura surrounding this Edmonton Oilers team right now. And the distance between these two teams geographically could certainly come into play. I know it sounds weird to say that geography matters in a series of this nature and in like specifically a betting odds list, but I do think it does. I think that Edmonton will want to come out for their hometown crowd and really make a statement. They don't want to go out without a bang. Connor McDavid certainly doesn't want to. And I think it would really make this Conn Smythe betting odds even more intriguing and versatile than it already has been. But as it stands, I'm really comfortable with how these standings are looking. I'm not necessarily angered, mad, or surprised at who is on this list because it speaks for itself as to how Florida has really taken over this series. But that will just about do it for this segment. Coming up next, weird, wacky, fun, whatever you want to describe it, a Game 3 between the Boston Celtics and Dallas Mavericks happened last night in the NBA Finals, and I will be here to cover all the fantasy implications and fantasy fallout from that game. You don't want to miss that segment. We will be right back to talk more about basketball.
I feel like I'm losing my mind.